Hey guys. Tonight's story starts with a cold draft that feels like a ghost licking your ankles. You wake in a stone room the size of a stable, the kind of place that holds grudges against warmth. The fire's dead, your breath's visible, and your armor's still damp from yesterday's heroics. Somewhere down the hall, a squire sneezes loud enough to wake the saints. You pull the blanket tighter, made mostly of sadness and goat hair, and wonder how anyone survived the night without becoming an icicle in chainmail. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake to a sound you can't name. Not a bird, not the wind exactly, but something that feels like the castle itself is sighing. Your breath floats in front of you in pale little clouds, each one a reminder that you're still alive, though it feels more like a technicality. The torch by the door sputters once and dies, leaving behind a smell of char and defeat. The walls groan softly, shifting like an old man in his sleep, and a bit of frost drifts down from the ceiling beam, landing on your nose with the precision of divine mockery. You pull the blanket tighter around you. It's not really a blanket so much as a suggestion. Rough wool, itchy enough to make you question morality. Beneath it, your straw mattress wheezes audibly, one tuft poking through the sheet like it's trying to escape. You shift, and the straw retaliates with a jab that feels personal. Outside the chamber, footsteps echo faintly, someone hauling firewood, or maybe a ghost with bad knees. You're not sure which is worse. The draft sneaks under the door again, sharper this time, threading through the cracks and coiling around your ankles like a mischievous serpent. You could swear the wind has learned your name. You bury your face into the pillow, which smells faintly of damp stone and something less identifiable history. Maybe. Old sweat. Definitely. The castle has a scent of its own, a blend of iron, smoke, and centuries of unwashed ambition. It clings to everything, even your dreams. You try to move, but your chainmail has frozen into its own small continent. You wore part of it to bed, a decision made in fear of rats and the general unpredictability of medieval nights. Now it creaks when you breathe, metal cold enough to numb skin through cloth. You consider removing it, but that would require touching it, and that's unthinkable. You glance toward the hearth. What's left of last night's fire is a sad geometry of ash, one tiny coal still glowing, defiant but doomed. You contemplate getting up to coax it back to life, but your limbs have unionized against the idea. Somewhere down the corridor, a squire sneezes so violently it sounds like a blessing and a curse at once. The noise startles a pigeon from the rafters above your head, and the sudden flutter sends down a soft blizzard of dust. You blink it away, muttering a prayer that's equal parts pious and profane. A drop of melted frost crawls down your forehead, slow and deliberate, like the castle itself is tasting your misery. The dawn creeps in reluctantly, spilling through the narrow arrow slit by your bed. The light is gray, cold, and judgmental. It lands on your face, finds your sins, and stays there. You sit up, or something close to it, bones cracking in protest. Your breath makes another cloud, and you watch it drift away toward the ceiling, as though even it wants to leave. On the far wall, your sword leans against a chair, the blade fogged with condensation, the hilt faintly steaming from where your hand gripped it last night. You'd planned to polish it before bed. You'd also planned to not wake up in a refrigerator built by masochists. You slide your legs over the edge of the mattress and find the floor with your toes. The stone is merciless. It feels like stepping on the memory of winter itself. Somewhere, below, the kitchen bell rings faintly, muffled through layers of stone and frost. Breakfast, probably something warm, if the gods are in a good mood, which they rarely are. You imagine bread, stew, something that might fog the windows. Instead, you'll likely get porridge so thick it qualifies as masonry. You stand, eventually, wrapping the blanket around your shoulders like a monk of bad decisions. The chill presses in from every direction. It hums faintly, Not a sound you hear, but one you feel, deep in the teeth. The walls are breathing again, their exhalations damp and ancient. The air tastes faintly of soot. A candle by the wash basin has melted unevenly into a small wax cliff. You light it, watch the flame dance, small but proud, the only thing in the room that seems to remember warmth. You walk to the window slit. The courtyard below is still and silver with frost. A groom trudges past the stables, breath fogging in thick bursts, his boots crunching like breaking bones. You envy him. Movement, after all, creates heat. You haven't had either for hours. From the battlements, a guard coughs into the wind and stamps his feet in what could be prayer or self-defense. Your stomach growls, offended by existence. The sound echoes faintly off the walls, startling you. You laugh once, a short, cracked noise that disappears almost instantly in the cold. The castle doesn't laugh back. It never does. It just settles around you, massive and indifferent, 1,000 stones stacked by people who thought endurance was the same as comfort. You pick up your boots, stiff and accusing. They creak as you force them on, your breath fogging faster now from the effort. The air bites harder with every movement, but at least it means you're not dead. You glance once more at the hearth. The coal finally fades, giving up its last whisper of orange to the gray morning light. You whisper, coward, but quietly, because if the cold has ears, and you suspect it does, you don't want to provoke it. Then, you pull your cloak tight, square your shoulders, and step out into the corridor, where the air somehow manages to feel colder still. Calling it a bed is generous. It's more of a lumpy suggestion, a straw-stuffed sack that sighs when you touch it and wheezes when you lie down. You sink into it just enough to wonder if it's trying to swallow you. The straw pokes through the cloth like it's staging a rebellion, each piece sharp enough to remind you you're alive, but only just. You pull the blanket up damp, heavy, and faintly smelling of something that once had a life of its own. It clings to you like a sad promise, trapping the cold in rather than keeping it out. You mutter a quick prayer for warmth, but it leaves your mouth as fog and vanishes before it reaches heaven. The pillow isn't much better. It feels like it's filled with despair and possibly turnip leaves. You flip it over, hoping for a dry side, but the dampness has achieved full democracy. Somewhere beneath you, the mattress groans in protest, shifting straw like old bones settling. You hear a faint crunch that might be a beetle or your own dignity. The smell rises, straw, mildew, sweat, and that faint metallic tang that castles collect the way taverns collect stories. You breathe through your mouth. It doesn't help. The fire across the room is a conspiracy of embers pretending to still exist. They glow faintly, but the warmth doesn't travel this far. Between you and the hearth stands the world's heaviest air, thick with cold and the faint hiss of something dripping into a bucket somewhere you can't see. You roll onto your side, immediately finding a new cluster of straw, determined to puncture your hip. You try the other side. It finds your shoulder. You stare at the ceiling beam above, tracing the cobwebs, wondering if the spiders are warmer than you. Somewhere in the corridor, a door slams, followed by a distant laugh and the unmistakable sound of armor clattering. Probably someone drunk again, celebrating survival in the only way possible by trying to forget it. You envy that. The blanket shifts as you breathe, sending a small gust of cold air up your neck. You tuck it tighter, but the fabric scratches like wool woven from disappointment. You try to find a comfortable position. There isn't one. Every movement stirs the straw into a symphony of crackles, each note perfectly designed to remind you that silence, too, is a luxury. A rat skitters along the wall. You freeze, eyes open, breath shallow. It pauses, listens, then continues its nightly patrol, like a tiny guard inspecting the premises. You whisper, "Good evening," because conversation is rare, and the rat seems like the only creature truly thriving here. The sound of its tiny feet fades into the stone. You close your eyes again, half hoping to dream of something warm. Sleep doesn't come easily. The castle has its own noises, muffled clanks, distant voices, the occasional cough that echoes down the stairwell like someone sneezing in Latin. The wind presses against the walls, sighing through cracks in long, mournful tones that make the torches flicker like nervous servants. Every sound feels amplified in the dark, every shift of straw a battle cry. The wool blanket grows heavier, trapping the scent of damp stone until you can almost taste it. You think about the stories they tell of noble knights, sleeping soundly before battle, resting peacefully in their valor. They never mention the itching, the damp, or the slow suffocation by wool. They never mention the moment you realize that even the fleas have found warmer quarters. You shift again, and something in the mattress crunches ominously. You whisper another prayer, not for warmth this time, but for structural stability. The faint glow from the fire fades completely. You can hear it die, a soft crackle turning into a long, exhausted sigh. The darkness feels thicker, heavier, pressing against your eyes, even though they're open. Somewhere outside, the wind picks up, sliding through the narrow window slit with the precision of a blade. It touches your face like an insult and steals your next breath before you can finish exhaling. You tuck the blanket higher, but it's like trying to hide under wet parchment. You try counting the drips from the ceiling. You make it to 7 before losing track, not because you're sleepy, but because each drop sounds like a different confession. You wonder if this is what comfort felt like to your ancestors, a place to lie down where no one's actively swinging a sword at you. The thought's almost soothing. Almost. Your eyes close eventually, though the cold remains. It creeps into your fingers, into your chest, even into your dreams, where the straw becomes snow and the blanket a frozen field stretching forever. You sleep, not because it's peaceful, but because your body gives up the argument. And somewhere above, the ceiling creaks approvingly, as if to say, another night survived. You stare at the ceiling, the candle guttering beside you, and wonder if the sound you're hearing is the wind or your own armor settling into rigor mortis. The metal plates cling to your shoulders like disappointed ancestors, every hinge whispering complaints whenever you move. You tell yourself you'll take it off in a minute, just one more breath. But the memory of last night's rat, the one that ran across your chest like it was training for knighthood, keeps you still. You shift anyway, and the noise your breastplate makes could wake the saints. The squire in the corner groans in his sleep, muttering something about haunted spoons, and turns over, pulling his blanket tighter. You envy him, that delicate softness of being unarmed, unarmored, unbitten. The straw beneath you rustles. You freeze. Something moves small, quick, ambitious. You lift your head, and in the flickering light, 2 tiny eyes flash back at you from the shadow near the wall. You hold perfectly still, because somehow it feels like you've entered negotiations. The rat pauses, twitches its whiskers, then scurries under your cot, dragging something that sounds suspiciously like a breadcrumb and disrespect. You tell yourself it's fine. You're the apex of human martial training. You've faced brigands, fire, siege, and tax collectors. You can survive a rodent. Still, you tighten the strap under your chin, just in case. The problem is the armor doesn't let you breathe properly. Every inhale feels like petitioning the metal for permission. You remove the gauntlets first, fingers stiff and red from cold, then rest them beside the bed. They clank softly, like tired applause. Your arms feel lighter, but now the air hits your skin cold, damp, slightly vindictive. You pull the wool blanket over your exposed hands, which does nothing except smell faintly of wet goat. The rest of the armor stays on. You tell yourself it's protection. Really, it's cowardice. A practical, self-preserving kind of cowardice, but cowardice all the same. Sleep comes in fragments, each one interrupted by the creak of the armor or the distant scurry of feet that definitely aren't your own. You dream briefly of warmth, a hearth, a heavy cloak, the luxury of linen. Then a sharp edge digs into your ribs, and you're back, blinking in the darkness, aware once again that your entire torso is encased in freezing iron. You shift your weight, trying to find a soft spot. But softness doesn't exist here. The pauldron bites into your collarbone, the gorget presses against your neck, and the cuirass, your faithful prison, hums faintly with condensation from your breath. Somewhere near your knee, a rivet pops faintly. You tell yourself that's normal. It probably isn't. The air tastes of old smoke and damp metal. You try to scratch your shoulder, but only succeed in rattling like an irritated chandelier. You can almost hear the armor mocking you. Comfort is for peasants. You whisper back, so is warmth. The room doesn't laugh. It just sighs again, a deep, groaning noise that makes the candle flicker. You pull the blanket higher, trapping the faint warmth from your body against the steel. It's a futile act, but so are most noble ones. Your sword leans against the wall, faintly gleaming in the half-light. You tell yourself you're ready, should danger come, but danger would only have to wait for you to unlatch 4 buckles, shrug off 2 plates, and roll out of bed like a beached fish. You picture the rat standing on your chest, saluting mockingly while you flail in slow motion. The thought makes you chuckle, quietly, until the sound of your own laughter echoes off the stone. It doesn't sound human anymore. A droplet of water falls from the ceiling onto your gauntlet with a delicate ping. Another follows, slower, louder. You glance up and realize the roof is sweating. Or maybe the entire castle is. You're not sure what's worse, rain finding its way in, or the structure itself crying. The drops fall in rhythm now, a lazy percussion against metal, stone, and patience. You wonder if the rats find it soothing. You try closing your eyes again, but the sound becomes hypnotic, looping endlessly until it merges with your heartbeat. The straw shifts again. You hold your breath. The rat's back, bold now. You feel the faintest brush against your boot, then nothing. You wait, eyes open in the dark, too proud to scream, too tired to care. You think about removing the armor again, just for relief. But the image of a rat crawling across your bare chest at dawn ends that fantasy. So you lie there half-dressed, half-miserable, entirely rusting, and wait for the morning to thaw you out of your metal cocoon. When it finally comes, it won't be warmth that wakes you. It'll be the smell of smoke, the sound of hooves, and the quiet realization that, somehow, you've survived another night no one would envy. You don't notice it at first. The morning light creeps in through the slit in the wall, a faint, pitiful glow that looks almost kind. Then the air follows sharp, invisible, malicious. It snakes across the flagstones, slides beneath your blanket, and kisses your ankles like an uninvited ghost. You jerk awake and immediately wish you hadn't. The draft is alive now, swirling through the room with purpose, exploring every gap, every seam, every crevice of exposed flesh it can reach. It's not just cold, it's personal. You sit up, rubbing your arms, watching your breath bloom in front of you like some tragic little fog. The castle hums quietly, pretending innocence, as though it isn't deliberately built to ensure human misery. You swing your legs over the bed and instantly curse the concept of architecture. The floor feels colder than water, colder than thought. You look down at your boots, sitting just out of reach like smug relics of better times. The wind seems to notice your hesitation. It grows bolder, slipping under the door, down the chimney, and somehow through the stones themselves, gathering strength as if it feeds on your indecision. By the time you snatch your boots, your toes have gone on strike. You shove your feet inside anyway and feel nothing but betrayal. You wrap your cloak tighter and glance around for the source. It's everywhere. The walls have become a choir of sighs, soft, endless exhalations from cracks older than the family tree carved above the hearth. Each one perfectly positioned to aim at something vital. One blasts your left ear, another sneaks up your sleeve, and the worst of them curls neatly into your collar like a snake, seeking citizenship. You press your hand against the nearest gap and feel the stones pulse, faint but steady, as though the castle itself enjoys this torture. You mutter a prayer for insulation and immediately remember that God too is cold here. You try stuffing cloth into the holes. A corner of your tunic here, a rag there. It's a hopeless gesture, like bandaging fog. The air simply reroutes, finding new pathways. It's intelligent, strategic. If wind could plot coups, this one would already have a throne. You stand back, shivering, assessing your failure, and realize that medieval engineering was less about keeping people warm and more about keeping them humble. Somewhere beyond the wall, you can hear a whistling note, high, lonely, and perfectly in tune with your suffering. The squire enters without knocking, wrapped in every blanket he owns. His nose is red, his hair damp with condensation, his expression that of a boy reconsidering his career choices. "Cold, sir?" he asks through chattering teeth. You look at him, he looks at you. Both of you laugh without humor. He suggests lighting another fire, but you've already tried that. The smoke simply chooses one of the drafts and escapes before it can do any good, leaving the rest to swirl around the room like a confused spirit. "It's like living inside a flute," you say. The boy nods solemnly, then sneezes so violently that dust falls from the rafters. You decide to move your cot closer to the hearth, hoping proximity to the idea of warmth might help. It doesn't. The moment you settle in, the draft shifts tactics. It climbs down the chimney itself, blowing ash and insult directly into your face. You wipe your eyes, coughing, and glance toward the narrow window slit. Frost has begun to form around the edges in delicate, mocking patterns, tiny flowers of ice blooming in the one place you can't reach. The wind hisses again, triumphant. You consider shouting back, but realize your words would probably come out frozen. Somewhere down the hall, a door slams open and closed repeatedly as the corridor draft conducts its own symphony. A servant curses, a goblet clatters, someone yells about damned holes, and you feel a brief moment of camaraderie. Misery here is communal. You sit by the hearth with your hands cupped around the faint warmth of a dying ember, while the draft continues its exploration. It finds your knees again, then your neck, then one final path down your spine that makes you reconsider the value of nobility altogether. The castle groans softly as if amused. You imagine the builders, centuries ago, laughing as they chiseled tiny gaps into the mortar. "Let the lords remember the wind," they might have said. And you do. Every hour, every night, every cursed morning, you pull the blanket tighter, close your eyes, and pretend the sound of the wind is waves instead of whispers. But it isn't. It's the same relentless breath that's touched every night before you, an ancient reminder that no matter how high your rank, the cold still knows your name. The squire drags his straw mat across the floor with the solemn authority of a man declaring war. Each scrape echoes through the chamber like a challenge. You watch from your cot, wrapped in the damp remains of your blanket, as he plants himself directly beside the hearth. Not near it, not politely close. Directly beside it, so close his toes could roast if he sneezes wrong. He glances back at you, face half lit by the fire's glow, and mutters the word, fairness, like it's a sacred hymn. You say nothing. You simply blink, slow and deliberate, because if you speak, you might commit a crime. He doesn't notice your stare. He's too busy sighing dramatically, the kind of sigh designed to be overheard. "It's only fair," he says again, voice wobbling with self-pity. "I fetch the wood. I clean the armor. I should have warmth, at least once." He adjusts his bed, tugs the blanket higher, and adds, "Besides, you snore." The accusation hits like an insult from a man who's never heard himself sleep. You resist the urge to throw your boot at him, mostly because it's frozen solid and might count as murder. The fire crackles, smugly aware of its role in the conflict. Its glow dances across the room, licking the stones, mocking your half-frozen toes. The heat doesn't travel far. It dies in the air before reaching you, collapsing like a noble promise. You shift, stretch your feet toward it, and feel nothing. Meanwhile, the squire lets out a contented hum that sounds suspiciously like gloating. He turns over, muttering something about destiny. You consider destiny too, the destiny where you wake up warm because you've shoved him aside and taken his spot by the fire. The wind hisses through the chimney, shaking loose a puff of ash that sprinkles down like dark snow. The squire coughs, waves it away, then tucks himself deeper into his blanket cocoon. He looks like a smug caterpillar preparing to emerge as a self-righteous butterfly. "You'll freeze there," he mumbles without opening his eyes. "I'm fine." You lie. You are not fine. You are a statue in decline. The cold has seeped into your bones, hollowing you from the inside out. Your breath fogs in front of your face like a ghost auditioning for sympathy. You stare at the fire until your eyes sting. It pops once, sending a spark onto the edge of his mat. He flinches, slaps it out, then shoots you a look. "You're trying to kill me." You lift an eyebrow. "If I were trying," you say, "you'd be warmer." The silence that follows is thick enough to choke on. The wind moans through the arrow slits again, rattling the shutters. Somewhere outside, a guard sneezes hard enough to shake the ramparts. Minutes crawl by. The squire starts snoring. Not the quiet, gentle kind, the kind that vibrates in your skull. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between snores like you're timing lightning. Each one feels like a personal attack. You roll over, pulling your blanket tighter, which only stirs up the smell of damp wool and despair. You try to picture warmer places sunlit, courtyards, southern beaches, anywhere that doesn't involve sharing a room with a snoring adolescent furnace thief. But your imagination, too, has frozen. The squire mumbles in his sleep. "My turn. Fire's mine." You glare at him through the half-dark. His face glows faintly in the light, peaceful and infuriating. A drop of melted wax slides down the candle beside you, hits the table, and hardens instantly. You take it as a metaphor for your own existence. The fire pops again, louder this time, as if laughing. You sit up slowly, the blanket sliding off your shoulders. The room feels alive, stone shifting, wind murmuring, fire crackling, all of it conspiring to make sure you stay awake. You rise, silent, careful, and take one measured step toward the hearth. The floorboards creak. The squire stirs. You freeze. He mumbles something about dragons, then turns his back to the fire, leaving a small, glorious gap of open heat. You hover there, considering the moral implications. They don't last long. You inch closer, stretching your fingers toward the warmth. It hits your skin like a memory, brief, beautiful, immediately addicting. You close your eyes. The fire sighs. For a moment, everything is still. Then the squire rolls over again, blanket flapping out like a flag of conquest, cutting off the heat entirely. You whisper something obscene under your breath and retreat to your corner before you're caught. By dawn, the fire is ash, the room colder than ever, and the squire's face glows with the smug radiance of the slightly less miserable. You're stiff, half-frozen, and plotting the details of a very slow, very justified revenge. Perhaps tonight you'll accidentally leave the door open. Perhaps his blanket will mysteriously vanish during inspection. Fairness, you think, should go both ways. But for now, you lie back, watching the first pale light crawl across the wall, and let the castle remind you once again that warmth, like loyalty, never stays where it should. It begins with optimism, which is always the first mistake. The three of you stand around the single blanket like diplomats at the world's worst peace summit, each convinced reason will prevail. The fire has long since died into sulking embers. The wind is circling the chamber in victory laps, and the blanket, thin, scratchy, damp in one corner, is the only thing standing between survival and frostbite. Sir Aldred, oldest and most self-righteous, clears his throat and says, "We'll share." He says it with the confidence of a man who's never shared anything successfully in his life. You nod solemnly because you want to believe him, and because your teeth are chattering too hard to argue. Sir Benoit, the youngest, already has one corner clenched in his fists. "I'll take this end," he says, which would be fine if he didn't immediately sit on it. You watch the blanket disappear beneath his bulk, like a ship swallowed by the sea. Aldred tugs gently, polite at first, then less so. The fabric stretches, squeaks, and threatens to tear. "Gentlemen," you whisper, "it's large enough for all of us." That's a lie, but lies are warmer than honesty. You settle on the floor beside them, positioning yourself between chivalry and murder. The blanket, such as it is, now covers half your legs and none of your pride. Someone coughs, the sound echoing against the stone walls like a death knell. "This is ridiculous," Aldred mutters, adjusting the corner he's managed to reclaim. "A knight of my rank shouldn't have to—" The wind howls through the chimney before he can finish, as if God himself has heard enough. Minutes pass in frosty silence. Then Benoit begins to hum, a low, tuneless sound, irritatingly content. You stare at him. "What are you doing?" He shrugs. "It helps me sleep. It helps me consider arson." Aldred growls. The humming stops, replaced by the delicate sound of teeth chattering. You close your eyes, focusing on the faint warmth shared between you, three bodies pretending not to be huddled for dear life. The blanket shifts again as Aldred rolls away slightly, taking half the coverage with him. Cold air floods your back like betrayal. "Give it back," you hiss. "I'm adjusting," he says. "You're annexing," you reply. Benoit giggles, and you all glare at him until he quiets, though not before muttering something about blanket borders. A few more minutes of silent tugging follow, the fabric stretching and twisting until it resembles a badly fought campaign flag. No one speaks, but the hierarchy of warmth is clear. Aldred has most, Benoit some, and you the moral high ground, which, as it turns out, provides no insulation whatsoever. The night drags on, the torch burns low. The castle breathes, its walls expanding and contracting with the cold. Somewhere above, a pigeon shifts in the rafters, sounding warmer than all of you combined. You drift towards sleep, only to be woken by a sharp yank. Benoit has rolled again, cocooning himself like an ambitious caterpillar. You lunge, grab the edge, and pull back with the desperation of a drowning man. He yelps, clutching tighter, spinning in circles on the floor like a startled eel. Aldred wakes with a roar, assuming attack, and joins in without knowing why. What follows cannot fairly be called combat. Too slow, too pitiful, but history will remember it as the Battle of the Blanket. When it's over, you're all lying there panting, tangled in wool and wounded pride. The blanket is now more whole than fabric. Aldred glares at both of you. "Unacceptable," he mutters, wrapping what remains around his shoulders like a monarch's cape. Benoit mutters something about democracy, but no one listens. The wind moans again, pushing ash across the floor in little drifts. You stare at the ceiling and contemplate mutiny. Time loses meaning. You stop trying to measure hours by the fire's light because there isn't any. The darkness presses close, smelling faintly of old smoke and embarrassment. Benoit eventually falls asleep, snoring softly. Aldred follows soon after, his head tilted back, mouth open, looking like a saint sculpted by someone who hated saints. You stay awake the longest, half covered by what remains of the blanket, listening to their breathing. Every exhale warms the air by a fraction. Every inhale steals it back. Dawn arrives slowly, pale and smug. The first light creeps across the floor, revealing the scene of disaster. One blanket, shredded. 3 knights, motionless. Honor, dead. Aldred stirs, rubbing his eyes. "We survived," he says. "Barely," you answer. Benoit stretches, yawns, and adds, "At least we learned something." You look at him. "Did we?" He smiles faintly. "Next time, we need 2 blankets." You laugh despite yourself, though it comes out more like a cough. The castle hums again, cold and ancient, as if amused by the notion of next time. You discover the truth sometime after midnight, when your neck starts protesting against the concept of existence. The pillow feels wrong, too stiff in the middle, too soft at the edges, and lumpy in a way that suggests it holds grudges. You punch it once, twice, then 3 times, hoping to fluff it into submission. Instead, it makes a sound that no pillow should ever make, a muted thud, followed by a faint smell of grain. You pause, press your ear to it, and realize with dawning horror that you have not been resting your noble head upon goose feathers or even old wool. It's oats. The thing cradling your skull through the long, freezing night is a bag of livestock feed. You lie there staring into the dark, the absurdity of your life hitting you all at once. Once, you dreamed of banners, of shining armor, of noble quests sung by bards in halls of gold. Now, you're drooling on breakfast. You lift the pillow experimentally. A few grains spill from a small tear in the corner, glittering faintly in the firelight, like mockery made tangible. You run your fingers over them, thinking, absurdly, that they look almost appetizing. You haven't eaten properly since yesterday's stew, if it was stew and not some early experiment in weaponized gruel. You could eat it, you think. Just a handful. The rats do. The thought should disgust you. It doesn't. You press your face back into the sack, trying to ignore the way the oats shift beneath your cheek like judgmental marbles. The texture is awful, but there's a faint warmth to it, stored from your own body heat. You tell yourself that's a good thing, that you're simply being resourceful. You've adapted. That's what knights do. They adapt to siege, to hunger, to bedding designed by people who clearly hated comfort. You close your eyes and attempt to drift off again, but the pillow crunches softly with every breath, like it's chewing on your thoughts. The squire stirs from the other side of the room, mumbling something in his sleep about victory or sausages. You glance over, see him nestled peacefully in his pile of rags, and envy him so deeply you could burst. His head rests on a rolled cloak, which seems decadent by comparison. You think about asking to trade, but pride wins out. You are a knight. You cannot beg for a pillow, even if yours doubles as a meal. You turn back, adjust the sack again, and accidentally inhale a grain up your nose. You sneeze violently, sending a small puff of oats into the air. It drifts down in slow motion, settling on your chest like shame in physical form. The castle groans around you, its old stones expanding with the cold, sighing with the weight of centuries and your personal stupidity. You pull the blanket tighter and whisper to no one, "I'm sleeping on food." The words hang in the air, absurd and accurate. The wind pushes through the window slit, stroking your face like it's mocking your choices. You think about swapping the pillow for folded clothes, but then remember, you only own one tunic, and it's still damp from yesterday's attempt at laundry. So you stay where you are, lying on your oat bag, a man of dignity and crumbs. Somewhere in the dark, a rat squeaks. You freeze. The sound comes again, closer this time, deliberate. You clutch the pillow possessively, an instinctive defense of property. "Don't even think about it," you whisper. The rat squeaks again, louder now, and you swear it's laughing. You slide the pillow under your arm, shielding it from view, and lie very still, pretending to sleep. If you can't have luxury, you'll have victory. Your mind drifts in and out of shallow, twitching dreams. In one, you're feasting at a great table, lords and ladies applauding as golden bowls of porridge are brought forth, steaming and perfect. You reach for one, but the bowl crumbles into burlap. You wake to the smell of real oats, your oats warmed slightly by your own breath. For a moment, you wonder if you could toast them over the fire, maybe sprinkle a little salt from the kitchen. Then you remember the kitchen doesn't allow you near the salt since the stew incident. You sigh and settle your cheek back onto the pillow, chewing quietly on the idea of surrender. By dawn, the sack has deflated noticeably, flattened by the weight of your head and your dignity. The room smells faintly of grain and cold air. You sit up, rubbing your neck, and watch a few stray oats tumble onto the floor. The rat from earlier appears, quick as sin, and snatches one. It stares at you, victorious, before vanishing into the wall. You stare after it for a long moment, then pick up the pillow and shake it, testing the remaining fill. Not much left. Still, it's yours. You drop it back onto the bed, flop down again, and close your eyes. The bag rustles softly beneath you. It's uncomfortable. It's ridiculous, but it's warm enough for now. The night starts the way. They all do, quiet, cold, and full of misplaced optimism. You finally manage to find a position on the straw mattress that doesn't feel like punishment. Your blanket is tucked under your chin. Your armor hangs awkwardly from the chair, and the candle has burned itself down to a little stub of stubborn light. The fire died hours ago, but you've convinced yourself that if you don't move, the chill won't notice you. It's almost peaceful. Almost. Then you hear it. A tiny scritch from somewhere near the wall. You hold your breath, eyes open in the dark, listening. Another scritch, then another. A mouse, you think, or several mice, holding a council meeting. You turn your head slowly, and sure enough, a pair of beady little eyes gleam back at you from the shadows. The mouse stares, motionless, like it's judging your life choices. You stare back, equally motionless, because movement would imply you care. The standoff lasts several seconds until it darts forward, bold as a soldier, straight toward your oat pillow. You lunge first, swatting the air with a sound somewhere between a growl and a prayer. The mouse disappears, leaving behind only the faint rustle of straw and the lingering feeling that you've been robbed. You sigh and settle again, pulling the blanket tighter, but the calm doesn't last. The next sound isn't small at all. It's the distinct thump of something landing on the windowsill. You glance toward the slit of moonlight, and there it is. A cat, black as sin, yellow eyes glowing like coins in the dark. It surveys you with the regal disdain of something that pays no rent. "Shoo," you whisper. The cat blinks, yawns, and proceeds to clean itself with unhurried contempt. You throw a bit of straw in its direction. It doesn't move. Instead, it curls up and begins to purr loudly, like it owns the place. The purr echoes off the stone in a rhythm that feels almost mocking. You decide you'll ignore it. The cat, predictably, decides otherwise. It leaps down, landing softly near your bed. You watch as it inspects your boots, sniffs your armor, and finally hops onto the foot of your cot. The added weight pulls your thin mattress just enough to tilt you toward the center. You mutter something about curses, and the cat stretches luxuriously, claws kneading the blanket as though testing its worth. The purring grows louder. You close your eyes, telling yourself at least it's warm, at least it's company. Then it turns around, circles twice, and presents you with its back. You sigh again because, of course. Minutes pass, maybe an hour. You start to drift somewhere between sleep and resignation when you hear the door creak. Not the wind this time, actual hinges, slow and deliberate. You freeze. The cat lifts its head, ears flicking. A figure stands in the doorway, holding a candle. The flame casts an uneasy halo around a bald head and a face that looks permanently startled. It's Brother Matthias, the monastery's resident insomniac. He squints at you, blinking owlishly. "Are you awake?" he whispers. You stare at him, blanket pulled up to your chin. "I wasn't," you say. "Ah," he nods, as though that explains everything, and then he shuffles in. The mouse reappears somewhere near your boot. The cat spots it instantly, launches itself from the bed, and knocks over the chair with a crash. Brother Matthias yelps, dropping his candle, which sputters but somehow survives. You sit up, hair standing on end, as the monk whispers something about dark forces. The cat darts across the floor, chasing the mouse into the shadows. There's a thump, a squeak, and then silence followed by the triumphant sound of purring again. The monk crosses himself dramatically. "A spirit," perhaps, he murmurs. It had a tail, you say flatly. Many spirits do, he replies, unhelpfully. He sits on the edge of your bed without invitation, hands folded like a man, waiting for divine instruction. Can't sleep, he sighs. Too many thoughts. The mind's a restless horse. You stare at him, hoping silence will act as eviction. It doesn't. He begins humming softly, a wavering tune that sounds like penance and melancholy blended into one. You lie back, eyes closed, trying to will yourself unconscious. But now the cat is back on your feet. The mouse is presumably plotting revenge, and the monk is halfway through a story about a dream he had involving turnips and sin. The candle flickers, throwing long shadows across the ceiling. You count them, trying to drown out his voice. One shadow looks like a sword, another like a hand reaching. The air feels colder again. The cat's tail swishes against your leg. Brother Matthias keeps talking, voice a low drone that eventually blurs into the ambient misery of castle life. You realize, dimly, that this is your life now sharing a room with rodents, clergy, and beasts, all united by sleeplessness and poor boundaries. When dawn finally stains the window with pale light, the monk has fallen asleep sitting upright. The cat has stolen your pillow, and the mouse has reclaimed its territory. You lie there in the dim gray silence, too tired to move, too cold to care. The castle breathes around you, old, drafty, and mildly amused. You close your eyes again, because there's no point fighting it. Comfort may never visit this place, but chaos clearly never misses a night. It begins with a feeling, not fear, not hunger, but a far more urgent, undignified summons from deep within your mortal coil. You lie there for several heroic minutes, bargaining with your own anatomy. You tell yourself you can wait until morning. You tell yourself it's too cold, too dark, and far too dangerous to move. But your body, ever loyal to chaos, disagrees. The decision is made for you when the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. You sigh, sit up slowly, and immediately regret every choice that led to this moment. The chamber is black as pitch, the air thick with the smell of soot and stone. Somewhere in the corner, the fire has died into a sullen smear of red. The chamber pot waits near the foot of the bed, allegedly. You remember placing it there before sleeping, feeling proud of your foresight. Now, however, it could be anywhere. You swing your legs over the edge of the mattress and plant your feet on the cold floor. The shock is biblical. The stone is slick with condensation, the kind of treacherous damp that feels almost alive. You stand, wobbling, blankets still draped around your shoulders like a cape of cowardice. Your eyes adjust slowly to the faint silver light leaking through the arrow slit. Shadows twist and stretch across the walls, transforming your armor into a crouched figure that appears to be plotting something. You take one cautious step. The floor answers with a soft squelch. Somewhere nearby, a mouse scurries, clearly alarmed by your lack of coordination. You shuffle forward, arms outstretched, whispering a prayer that sounds less holy than desperate. Your hand brushes against the table, then the chair, then finally the cold rim of the pot. Salvation. You exhale a shaky laugh, triumphant in the smallest possible way. Then you promptly kick the edge of the stool beside it. The stool tips, the pot wobbles, and time slows down in the cruel way it always does right before disaster. The sound that follows is unmistakable. A hollow, echoing clang, then a splash, and then silence so deep it almost rings. You freeze, heart stopping, as the realization sinks in. The chamber pot has fallen. You stand there, barefoot, on a cold, wet floor, in a century that will not invent shame properly for another few hundred years. You whisper a quiet, furious no, as if denial might reverse physics. It does not. The smell confirms what you already know. The tragedy is complete. You lunge for the blanket and use it to mop the worst of it. Then, remember too late that it's your only blanket. The cold air hits your skin through the soaked wool, and suddenly you understand the true meaning of irony. You mutter every saint's name you can recall, skipping over the ones you're sure are judging you. Somewhere above, a pigeon coos mockingly in the rafters. The universe, it seems, has impeccable comedic timing. You search for something else, anything to clean with. The squire's spare tunic hangs nearby, still damp from yesterday's failed washing attempt. You hesitate for only a second before grabbing it. It's not theft, you tell yourself. It's survival. The fabric absorbs about as much as a moral excuse. You press on anyway, crouched in miserable silence, the cold creeping through your bones and into your soul. A sound breaks the quiet. Footsteps, soft and hesitant, coming down the corridor. You freeze again. The last thing you need is an audience. The door creaks open, just enough for a face to appear. Brother Matthias, candle in hand, his eyes wide as saucers. "Are you all right?" he whispers. You blink at him, dripping in equal parts sweat, shame, and medieval plumbing. "Yes," you lie flatly, "just praying." He nods solemnly, as though this explains the smell, and withdraws without another word. The door closes, and you hear him mumbling a verse about humility as he goes. You sit there on the floor for a long while after, staring at the overturned pot. The candle on the table flickers weakly, illuminating the battlefield. The chair, the blanket, the streaks on the stone, all evidence of your defeat. The air hums faintly with the chill of night, but you're too tired to fight it anymore. You right the pot, cover it again, and crawl back into bed. The blanket is damp and smells faintly of consequence. You pull it over your head anyway. The cold presses in, unforgiving, but your body has learned resignation. You close your eyes and think of morning, of sunlight, of the luxury of wooden floors and indoor plumbing. Then the wind sighs through the cracks in the wall, the pigeon shuffles above, and somewhere the mouse returns to its midnight rounds. You let out one last breath that fogs in the air above you, and whisper, "I hate this castle." Before sleep, merciful and indifferent, finally takes you. The morning begins with the kind of cold that has personality, vindictive, ancient, and utterly uninterested in your survival. You wake beneath a blanket, stiff with damp, every breath a pale ghost rising toward the ceiling beams. The embers in the hearth glow faintly, like the last heartbeat of a dying giant. You stare at them with the same desperation you'd reserve for a friend holding the final slice of bread. If you don't relight it soon, your toes may legally qualify as fossils. You swing your legs off the bed, wincing as your bare feet meet the flagstone. The cold shoots up through your bones like divine punishment. You shuffle toward the hearth, wrapping the blanket around yourself like a cape of failure. The woodpile beside it is meager, a handful of thin sticks and 2 logs that look like they've given up on ever being useful again. You kneel down, grab the flint, and strike. Sparks leap, fizz, die. You try again and again. By the 5th attempt, the flint is slick in your hand, and your breath has turned to muttered curses. The sparks land on the kindling, glow hopefully for a second, then fade out, smothered by air that feels wetter than it has any right to be indoors. You lean closer, puffing gentle encouragement. The kindling answers with a faint hiss, as if offended by your optimism. You add more straw, more splinters, whisper promises of warmth, glory, divine favor. Nothing. The smoke rises, yes, but thin and white mocking smoke. The kind that says, "You're trying, bless you." You reach for one of the logs, strike it against the stone a few times out of sheer spite, and notice ice crystals glinting along the grain. The wood is frozen solid. The logs are, quite literally, colder than you. You sit back on your heels, staring at the hearth like it's an enemy general. The room is dead quiet except for the faint creaking of the walls, old stones shifting in sympathy or amusement, you can't tell which. Behind you, the cat stretches on your bed, yawns extravagantly, and curls back into a ball. You consider throwing it into the fire as kindling, but suspect it would only come back warmer and angrier. The squire stumbles in a few moments later, half asleep, scratching at his head. "Cold again?" he mumbles. You turn to him with the look of a man moments from confession. "It refuses," you say. The fire refuses. He blinks, eyes adjusting to the dim light, then nods as though this makes perfect sense. "Did you ask it nicely?" You stare at him, wondering if murder might generate enough heat to be practical. "Fetch more wood," you say instead. He shrugs, wraps himself in his own blanket, and disappears through the door. Minutes pass. The flint scrapes again, sparks jump again, and still the fire plays dead. You can feel the chill creeping into your armor on the chair, the iron turning colder than mercy. Somewhere in the corridor, a gust of wind howls through the arrow slits, a hollow moan that feels too deliberate. It snakes into your chamber, lifts the edge of your blanket, and steals what little warmth you have left. You curse the wind, the wood, the castle, the entire architectural concept of stone. The squire returns with an armful of what might generously be called firewood splinters, twigs, and something that looks suspiciously like part of a broken stool. "This was all I could find," he says, shivering. You pile it all into the hearth, muttering something halfway between a prayer and a threat. Another strike, another spark. This time, miraculously, a thin orange tongue flickers along the straw. You lean in, eyes wide, fanning it carefully. The flame hesitates, then grows. A glow builds. A whisper of crackle fills the silence, and for one glorious moment, victory seems possible. Then the log hisses, pops, and emits a sound not unlike laughter as the flame chokes itself out in a puff of smoke. You cough, eyes watering, waving the air like a man signaling surrender. The squire coughs too, mutters something about divine punishment for your past sins. "I don't recall committing any worth freezing for," you say. "Then it's probably mine," he replies, and retreats to his corner with admirable cowardice. The room fills with the smell of wet ash and disappointment. You sit back again, dizzy from the smoke, blanket over your shoulders like a defeated general's cloak. The sun outside has yet to rise. Its absence feels intentional. You stare into the hearth until your eyes blur, imagining heat that isn't there. The fire hasn't just refused, it's mocked you, humiliated you, reminded you who's really in charge here. The squire starts snoring softly in the corner. The cat's purr resumes, steady and smug. You lie back on the floor, staring up at the ceiling beams, your breath fogging and fading in the cold air. The faintest glimmer of dawn creeps through the window slit, painting the frost on the walls gold for a heartbeat before the color fades again. The world doesn't care that you're cold. The fire doesn't care that you tried. You pull the blanket tighter, press your hands to your chest for warmth, and murmur into the still air, "Fine, have it your way." And the hearth, silent and victorious, answers with nothing at all. Sleep comes slowly, not as a mercy but as a negotiation. You've spent the last hour chasing warmth like it's a rumor, curling tighter under the damp blanket, burying your chin, flexing your toes, just to make sure they still belong to you. The hearth sulks in the corner, its ashes faintly glowing like dying memories. The wind sighs, through the cracks again, brushing your cheek with the intimacy of someone who knows exactly how to ruin your night. Somewhere, a shutter bangs, the echo bouncing off the walls like a ghost refusing to mind its business. You turn your face into the pillow, if it can still be called that, and finally drift into something resembling rest. Your dreams don't begin so much as stumble into focus. At first, it's only the heat, the kind that hums against your skin instead of stabbing it. You're lying in a bed that isn't trying to kill you. The air smells of cinnamon and roasted almonds, not mildew and mouse droppings. A window stands open, but instead of shrieking wind, there's a breeze, soft and lazy, carrying the sound of a lute somewhere far below. You lift your head and realize you're in a castle. Yes, but not this one. The walls here are whitewashed and sunlit. the tapestries golden and alive. A fire dances in the hearth like it enjoys existing. You can hardly believe it's real, so you stand, waiting for the chill to find you again. It doesn't. The floor is warm, smooth stone that seems to hum faintly with life. You walk toward the window and look out over a courtyard flooded with light. Orange trees glow in the sun, their leaves trembling in the gentlest wind. Servants stroll through the garden in shirt sleeves, laughing. No one's shivering, no one's cursing damp straw. Somewhere, a knight naps under a fig tree, mouth open, completely unashamed. You watch him, half jealous, half inspired. A woman passes below, balancing a tray of steaming bread. The smell rises and wraps around you like a promise. You imagine tearing a piece off, butter melting instantly, not freezing mid-spread like back home. In this dream castle, no one ever burns their hands trying to coax fire from damp wood. The chimneys puff politely, the smoke clean and fragrant. Even the dogs look content, lying belly up in patches of sunlight, their fur glossy with smug satisfaction. You sit by the window, letting the warmth soak into your bones. Somewhere, a bell rings a soft sound, gentle as a sigh. It's the kind of place that makes you forget frost ever existed. A bird lands on the sill, feathers the color of wine, and looks at you without fear. You reach out a hand and it doesn't flee. Instead, it chirps, tilts its head, and hops closer. For a fleeting second, you think it might speak. And then, of course, it does, though not in words. Its chirp becomes a cough. The sunlight flickers. The sound of the sea outside turns into dripping water. The warm air grows heavy, the scent of oranges fading into smoke. The bird blinks, once, twice, then bursts into a cloud of ash that smells faintly of burnt straw. You open your mouth to shout, but the heat vanishes all at once, as if someone has sucked the sun out of the room. The fire in the hearth gutters, sputters, and dies. You jolt awake, the real world snapping back like a slap. The first thing you notice is that your nose is freezing. The second is that your pillow has absorbed more moisture than should be legally possible. The dream lingers, cruel and bright, like the aftertaste of a feast you didn't get to eat. You stare at the ceiling beams, tracing cracks that look vaguely like maps. If you squint, one almost resembles a coastline, a long sweep of warmth where the sea never freezes and the wind doesn't whistle through your ribs. You close your eyes again, hoping to claw your way back to that southern dream. But the castle has already reclaimed you. The cold presses close, smug and unrelenting. The cat at your feet shifts, its fur a poor substitute for a sunbeam. You pull the blanket tighter, muttering to yourself, just once, just one night, without freezing. The wind answers immediately, a low moan that rattles the window and sends a chill down your spine. You stare into the dark for a long time, thinking about orange trees and laughter and fires that don't give up. Halfway through their duties, you imagine yourself in that southern castle again, only this time you're not visiting. You live there, permanently warm, permanently comfortable. Then another gust snakes under the door, and you laugh softly to yourself, a dry sound that fogs the air. The dream may have lied, but for a moment, it had felt real. You roll onto your side, close your eyes, and whisper into the pillow, "Tomorrow, I'm moving south." But even you don't believe it. You start the evening with a kind of optimism that only desperation can produce. The cook, a man with a voice like gravel and hands like small hams, insists he knows the cure for cold bones. He calls it Knight's Lotion, and he presents it in a mug so dented it looks like it survived several wars. The liquid inside smells faintly of barley, smoke, and questionable decisions. "Warms the blood," he says proudly, as if that settles the matter. You stare into the mug. It stares back. There's a bubble, slow and suspicious. You drink anyway. The first swallow burns all the way down, like swallowing a torch. The second is easier, because your tongue has stopped filing complaints. By the third, Your chest feels pleasantly hot, your head fuzzes, and the world takes on a slightly kinder glow. The cook grins, slapping your back hard enough to realign your spine. See? Fire inside, frost outside, works every time. You're too dizzy to argue. The squire joins in naturally, insisting that real knights drink 2 mugs. You do. He has one, and immediately begins singing a song about goats. Somewhere between the 3rd verse and the 4th, you forget the cold entirely. The great hall around you blurs into warmth and laughter. Even the fire seems to burn brighter. A minstrel you've never seen before appears from nowhere, strumming something that sounds like a love song to bad decisions. The reeve tries to dance and nearly sets his sleeve on fire. The steward, who usually looks like he was born disappointed, actually smiles. You're convinced the cook's concoction is a miracle. You raise your mug high and declare, "No frost shall conquer me," which would sound heroic if you didn't immediately trip over the bench and spill half your miracle onto your boots. Someone cheers. Someone else laughs so hard they snort into their porridge. The room spins in lazy circles. You sit down, or fall down, it's hard to tell. The floor feels oddly welcoming, like an old friend who doesn't judge. The squire keeps singing about goats, louder now. You join in for the chorus, though you suspect it changes every time. The cook hands you another drink, and by then, you've stopped questioning the physics of generosity. The world glows amber. For the first time in weeks, you feel almost warm. When you wake, it's a different story entirely. The first thing you notice is the light, thin, cruel daylight stabbing through the window slit. The second is the cold. It's everywhere. It's inside you, behind your eyes, crawling in your skull. Your mouth tastes like the inside of an old boot. You lift your head, instantly regret it, and collapse back onto the pillow, which seems to be stuffed with rocks and the faint smell of old ale. The squire is on the floor beside you, wrapped in his cloak like a corpse. His hand clutches an empty jug. You stare at him for a moment, waiting to see if he's breathing. He groans softly, which you take as a yes. The cook's promise of fire in the blood feels like a cruel joke now. Your blood feels more like cold soup. The castle is silent, except for the occasional drip of water from the ceiling, and the sound of your heartbeat trying to escape through your temples. You attempt to sit up again, slower this time, and take inventory of your surroundings. The table is overturned. Someone's boot is in the hearth. There's a spoon in your gauntlet, and the cat is licking something off your armor that you don't want. Identified. You rub your face, which feels like parchment. The world tilts. You steady yourself, whispering a prayer for the invention of coffee, several centuries too early. The cook appears in the doorway, far too cheerful. "Feeling warm?" he asks. You look at him through the fog of your suffering. "Like the grave," you croak. He chuckles, slaps the doorframe, and says, "Good," means it's working. You briefly consider launching your helmet at him, but can't muster the energy. Instead, you nod weakly, pretending agreement, because that's easier than existing. You pull your cloak tighter, realizing the cold is worse than before. Somehow, impossibly, the hangover has made the chill sharper, meaner. Your fingers ache, your breath fogs in the air, and your teeth chatter with the rhythm of a condemned man's drum. The fire in the hearth has gone out entirely, leaving behind only blackened wood and a faint smell of smoke and failure. You stare into it, half expecting the ghost of last night's warmth to whisper apologies. The squire groans again, rolling onto his side. "Next time," he mumbles, "we drink less." You nod solemnly, though you both know that's a lie. Knights are slow learners. You drag yourself upright, grab your boots, and mutter, "The South. They don't drink to stay warm there." The cook overhears and grins. "Then they drink wrong," he says. You manage a weak laugh, mostly to prove you're still alive. Outside, the wind howls through the courtyard, sharp as glass. You take one step toward the door and swear you can feel your blood freeze mid-vein. So much for the lotion of nights. You pull your cloak tighter and whisper, to no one in particular, "Next time, I'll just freeze." And for the first time all morning, the thought almost feels comforting. Laundry day begins not with a plan, but with defeat. The pile of clothes by your bed has reached critical mass, shirts stiff as bark, hose that could stand on their own, and a smell that feels sentient. The squire suggests burning them, but you're low on firewood and lower on dignity. So you haul everything to the courtyard, where the wind greets you with the affection of a slap. The water barrel waits there, crusted over with ice. You break the surface with a stick, watching shards drift like tiny ships of despair. The first sleeve you dunk freezes almost instantly, turning your shirt into a weapon. You press on, because nights do not surrender to laundry. Within minutes, the courtyard becomes a battlefield of steam, curses, and questionable methods. The soap, more gray than white, refuses to lather. You rub it against the fabric anyway, creating a sad, squeaking sound that echoes through the cold. The squire watches from the doorway, holding your spare tunic like a hostage. "Maybe wait until spring," he suggests. You ignore him. Honor demands clean garments, or at least garments that no longer smell like defeat and old ale. You wring one out, hang it on the line, and it immediately hardens into a frozen flag of your failure. Soon, the line is full of clothes standing stiff in the wind, sleeves outstretched like they're surrendering to heaven. You step back to admire your work, hands red and numb, water dripping from your elbows. The sky is an unbroken gray slab. A crow lands nearby, stares at your frozen socks, and seems to pity you. You tell yourself warmth will come from motion, so you stomp your feet, clap your hands, and mutter heroic things about perseverance. None of it helps. The cold chews through your armor, your bones, your sense of humor. The squire reappears, holding a mug of something steaming. You reach for it with reverence, imagining hot cider or broth. It's water, cold water. You didn't say what kind. He shrugs. You consider banishment, then remember he's the one who fetches firewood. "Bring the clothes inside," you tell him, but he shakes his head. "They're solid," he says. "You'd have to carry them like shields." He's right. One shirt has frozen mid-fold. The hose are bent at the knee, forever mid-step. You stare at your undergarments, suspended in icy glory, and wonder briefly if nudity might be the nobler path. The thought isn't madness, it's practicality. The Romans did it, didn't they? Or maybe they just had the sense to live somewhere with sunlight. You glance toward the hall, where warmth and a half-empty ale jug still wait. The idea of walking back bare feels both scandalous and thrilling. The wind picks up, and your frozen shirt flaps like it's laughing. You strip off your damp tunic, toss it onto the line, and stand there in the bitter air, half naked, steam rising faintly from your skin. The cold hits instantly, sharp and personal. Every nerve wakes up to complain. You last 10 seconds before sprinting for the door. The squire's laughter follows you down the hall. You burst inside, gasping, cloak flying, dignity left behind in the courtyard. The cat looks up from the hearth, unimpressed. You huddle by the dying fire, wrapping a blanket around yourself and inhaling the faint scent of last night's smoke. The squire arrives a moment later, smug, announcing that one of your shirts snapped in half. "It's art now," he says. You glare at him, teeth chattering too hard to form a proper insult. By the time night falls, the courtyard has transformed into a gallery of frozen laundry, your tunics like statues, your hose like wilted flags, all glittering faintly under the moonlight. You imagine travelers passing by someday, marveling at the strange knight who washed his clothes in winter and left them to die upright. You sip the cook's weak ale and mutter, "At least they're clean." The squire snorts. "And technically armored." You laugh despite yourself, because he's right. Somewhere out there, your linen stands braver than you, defying frost and common sense. Tomorrow, they'll thaw or break. Either way, it'll make a story. You stretch your hands toward the fire, still half naked, and whisper, "Next time, I'm burning them." The flame flickers, as if agreeing, throwing one last warm light against the window, where your frozen laundry shimmers like ghosts, saluting your stupidity. It starts before dawn, as all miserable things do. The air has teeth again, sharp, invisible ones that bite through blankets and armor alike. You lie there in the darkness, perfectly still, hoping that if you pretend to be dead, the cold might show mercy. It doesn't. The walls breathe frost. Your breath puffs white into the air, hangs there a moment like a ghost reconsidering its life choices, and vanishes. Somewhere nearby, someone groans, then another coughs. Then another lets out the long, low whimper of a man wondering if this is how glaciers feel from the inside. Soon, the sound grows a quiet, quivering chorus. The first note is the chattering of teeth. It starts with Sir Edric, whose jaw has the rhythm of a horse clopping down cobblestone. His squire joins in, the high-pitched counterpoint of youth. Across the room, someone mutters a prayer that mostly consists of threats toward the Almighty if warmth doesn't arrive soon. It's followed by a sneeze, a sniff, and another round of teeth clattering in perfect accidental unison. You lie there, listening. It's almost musical, in a desperate way. 100 little bones vibrating at once, sinking by pure suffering. The sound bounces off the stone walls, growing fuller, richer like a choir no one asked for and no one can stop. A kind of harmony born from collective frostbite. The basses are the older knights, all low grumbles and muffled curses. The tenors are the squires, their chattering sharp and erratic. The sopranos are the horses in the stables, neighing through their own clouds of breath. Together, it becomes something strangely beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful. You can't help but laugh once, though it comes out as a wheeze. The moment the air leaves your chest, you regret it, your ribs seize, your lungs burn, and the warmth escapes faster than your will to live. You pull the blanket tighter around yourself, but it's like wrapping yourself in a damp promise. Somewhere, Sir Bertram declares he can no longer feel his toes. Someone else asks what toes are. The squire by the door shuffles closer to the hearth, which isn't burning anymore but still carries the faint memory of a flame, like a ghost that refuses to move on. The cold unites everyone. Rank and title dissolve beneath the shared misery. Nobles, squires, stable hands all reduced to a single organism powered by shivering. No one's proud anymore. A knight famous for killing 3 men in a duel now whimpers into his pillow. Another mutters that he'd sell his sword for a cup of soup. A man near the corner begins humming between his teeth, not out of joy but as an act of survival. The others join in, first out of mockery, then out of madness. And suddenly, there it is, the chamber choir of teeth, in full performance. The melody rises naturally, if melody can describe the layered noises of misery. The hums blend with chattering, the sneezes add percussion, the moans fill the low end like a monk's drone. It's haunting, accidental art. You can almost imagine some bard centuries from now turning it into legend. The night the knights sang the winter awake. You join them, because why not? A quiet hum, half breath, half defiance. The sound vibrates in your skull, mingling with everyone else's until you can't tell whose voice is whose. The hall fills with it, growing louder until even the walls seem to hum back. The cold doesn't care, of course, but for one impossible moment, it feels like the sound itself warms the air. Then the cook bursts in, wrapped in so many furs he looks like a walking carpet. He blinks, confused, staring at a room of knights harmonizing through chattering teeth. What in God's name, he begins, but Sir Bertram cuts him off with a sharp shh. The choir pauses, trembling, listening to their own echoes fade into the rafters. It's quiet again. Then someone sneezes, loudly. The spell breaks, the cook snorts. You all sound like a sack of spoons. He tosses a log into the hearth, muttering something about idiots and frost. The flame catches, sputtering at first, then blooming gold. The room exhales as one. The chattering slows, the moaning stops. A few men laugh weakly. Someone says, "We made music," and someone else replies, "We nearly died." Both are true. You edge closer to the fire, letting the first wave of heat hit your face. The thawing hurts more than the freezing did, but it's the kind of pain that feels alive. Around you, the others stretch, groan, slap each other on the shoulders. The choir has disbanded, but the memory lingers an echo in the stone, a harmony born of pure endurance. You close your eyes and smile faintly. The silence that follows is almost holy. For a moment, you miss the sound of all those teeth, your unholy orchestra of frost and survival. Then a gust of wind slips under the door, the temperature drops again, and the first faint chatter begins anew. The encore has arrived. The idea begins, as all terrible ones do, with confidence. Your squire, flushed with the self-importance of youth and mild frostbite, announces he's found a solution. You're too cold to argue. You're sitting by the hearth, what's left of it wrapped in a blanket that smells like wet dog and despair, staring at a single ember glowing faintly like a dying thought. "Sir," he says, holding up a stone, "heat retention." You blink at him, half asleep, half frozen. "What?" "Heat retention," he repeats, louder this time, as though volume will add science. You squint. The rock looks ordinary gray, chipped, aggressively rock-like. "It keeps the heat," he explains proudly. You put it by the fire, let it warm, then you tuck it under the mattress. Brilliant, yes? You stare at him, calculating whether frostbite is preferable to whatever comes next. "And you've tested this?" He beams. "Absolutely not." Before you can reply, he tosses the stone directly into the hearth, where it lands with a satisfying clunk. You both watch it heat, waiting like pilgrims before a miracle. After several minutes, he uses a pair of tongs to lift it out, holding it like the Holy Grail. The stone glows faintly red, steam curling from its surface. "Perfect," he says. "Perfect for what?" "Warmth, my lord." He disappears toward your bed before you can object. You stand slowly, already feeling disaster queue up like a procession. Perhaps you begin, but he's already shoving the stone beneath the straw mattress with the zeal of a man certain he'll be remembered as a genius. There's a hiss, then another, then a sound that can only be described as ominous crackling. At first, you both pretend it's fine. You tell yourself that warmth has a sound, that maybe comfort occasionally crackles. Then the smell hits sharp, dry, and rapidly evolving into panic. You lift the corner of the blanket and see it. A faint red glow spreading under the mattress like the dawn of stupidity. The squire yelps. You shout. The straw catches properly this time, flaring up with the enthusiasm of something that's waited centuries to burn. He grabs a bucket. It's empty. You grab your blanket. It's wool, so now it smells like cooking sheep. Smoke fills the chamber, thick and immediate, curling up toward the rafters, as if trying to alert the entire castle that your collective IQ has dropped by half. You start beating at the mattress while shouting every saint's name you can remember, which isn't many. The squire trips over the bucket, falls into the fire, and somehow comes out holding the one log that was still lit. For a moment, he's standing there, eyes wide, hair smoking, looking exactly like divine punishment given human form. "Put it down!" you yell. He does, onto the floor. The floor now joins the rebellion. You lunge, kick the burning log toward the hearth, and nearly set your sleeve alight. The cat screams, bolts through the smoke, and disappears under the table, offended on a spiritual level. The room becomes a blur of frantic motion, your squire throwing handfuls of ash, you smothering embers with a pillow that instantly becomes part of the fire, the air thick with the scent of roasted futility. Finally, mercifully, it ends. The last flame dies with a hiss, leaving behind only smoke, blackened straw, and two men coughing like they've swallowed winter itself. The mattress is gone, just a skeleton of scorched rope and ashes. The squire sits on the floor, covered in soot, hair singed into new and innovative angles. "Well," he says weakly, "it worked. For a bit." You stare at the ruin of your bed, eyes watering, chest heaving. "How long?" He thinks. "Perhaps 30 seconds. You nod slowly. "An impressive record." He brightens slightly, as if you've given him a medal. You wave your hand toward the wreckage. "Clean it," you croak, and collapse onto the cold stone floor. The smoke drifts lazily upward, curling into the cracks between the beams. The smell will never leave. You stare at the ceiling and wonder if there's a saint for surviving idiocy. The squire hums while sweeping ashes, cheerfully unaware that he's one experiment away from excommunication. "Next time," he says, "I'll try heating bricks instead. They're sturdier." You close your eyes. "Next time," you mutter, "I'll sleep outside." The night stretches on, long and smoky. The room is colder than before, but you can still feel the ghost of that brief, impossible warmth, the half-minute where it actually worked. The memory of it flickers in your chest, bright and stupid. You almost laugh, because that's the thing about warmth in this castle. It's always fleeting, always dangerous, and somehow always the squire's fault. The morning arrives with ceremony and frostbite. The steward bursts in before dawn, clapping his hands like a man trying to wake the dead. "Up!" he shouts. "His lordship rides at first light." You blink from your half-frozen bed, unsure whether this is a blessing or punishment. The squire groans from the corner, still wrapped in his blanket cocoon. "Is he bringing firewood?" you ask. The steward glares, unimpressed by humor. "He brings dignity. You'd rather have firewood." By mid-morning, the castle courtyard looks alive for the first time in weeks. Servants bustle, torches sputter, and someone even sweeps the snow, though more keeps falling as if the heavens themselves disapprove of the effort. You stand in your finest armor, which at this point is mostly rust and hope, waiting for the guest of honor. The trumpets blare, an unnecessarily cheerful sound for such weather. Then he arrives, Lord Merton of somewhere warmer, wrapped in a fur cloak that looks like it cost more than the castle itself. He dismounts with a flourish that would have been impressive if his legs weren't visibly trembling. The man's face is the color of milk, his breath billowing like a dragon on its last gasp. "Magnificent air," he declares, voice booming despite the slight chatter in his jaw. "Bracing, invigorating." You watch his lips turn a worrying shade of blue and wonder if he'll freeze mid-sentence. The steward beams at him, as if this is all perfectly normal. Inside, the great hall has been prepared for him, or rather, scrubbed to the point of structural damage. The fire has been coaxed into a sulky roar, though it mostly smokes instead of burns. The lord removes his gloves with theatrical care, revealing hands that look more frostbitten than noble. "Splendid warmth," he says, rubbing them together briskly. A drop of melted ice falls from his sleeve and lands on the table. You all stare at it for a moment, like it's a miracle. You're assigned to stand near him, because apparently your presence lends knightly dignity. You suspect it's actually because the steward doesn't trust you not to say something treasonous from farther away. The Lord talks endlessly, praising the beauty of winter, the crispness of northern air, and how men in warmer lands have grown soft. He says this while visibly shivering so hard his teeth add percussion to the conversation. You nod politely, watching his cup rattle against the table. When the first course arrives, lukewarm stew and bread stiff enough to qualify as a weapon, he insists he adores rustic fare. He raises his spoon with trembling fingers and manages a single bite before coughing like he's inhaled. Powdered misery. The steward rushes to pour him more wine, which he drinks with the desperation of a drowning man. "Excellent vintage," he gasps, though it's the same watery ale everyone else suffers through. You can see the truth in his eyes now. The panic of a man realizing he's not built for this latitude. His smile is too tight, his laughter too brittle. Each gust of wind through the cracks in the wall makes him flinch. Exhilarating draft, isn't it? He says, through gritted teeth, as the curtain beside him flutters violently. You almost admire his commitment to lying. Almost. The conversation drifts to tales of battle, of bravery, of endurance. He tells a story about a campaign in the South where the worst hardship was a week of rain. Around the table, knights exchange glances that say everything. Sir Aldred sniffs. We once lost a man to frost while standing still. The Lord laughs too loudly, nodding as if that's charming rather than horrifying. Marvelous constitution you Northerners have, he says, before sneezing so violently his crown of authority nearly flies off. When the meal ends, he insists on a tour of the battlements. The steward protests. It's dusk, the wind's rising, but his lordship will not be denied. I relish the night air, he declares. You follow him up the stairs, trying not to look at the servants exchanging wagers behind you. Outside, the world is white and cruel. The torches flicker, the snow bites, and the wind howls like it's laughing. The Lord steps onto the parapet, raises his chin, and inhales sharply. Ah, he says, glorious. His cloak flaps wildly, nearly yanking him backward. You take one cautious step closer just in case. Truly invigorating, he repeats, though his voice now trembles like a loose window pane. His cheeks are pale, his eyes watery, and his breath shallow. I feel, he manages, so very alive. Then he sneezes again, nearly doubling over. By the time you return him to the hall, he's silent, staring into the fire with the expression of a man negotiating with God. The steward fusses with his cloak, murmuring apologies. He says nothing. You pour him another drink, which he downs in one gulp. Eyes glassy. The wind moans through the tower, and someone somewhere laughs. The next morning, the Lord departs early. He leaves behind a generous donation for the brave men of the North, along with a pair of fur gloves he forgot on the table. As he rides away, you can still see the faint steam rising from his breath. The steward sighs with satisfaction. A fine visit, he says. You watch the distant figure shrinking into the snow and mutter, he'll never come back. And for the first time all winter, you feel truly certain of something. They call it bath day, as if it's a reward, as if the mere word bath should conjure comfort, steam, and civilization. You cling to that hope for as long as you can. The servant who delivers the news says it with a grin, the kind that suggests either kindness or a trap. Hot water, sir, he promises. You stand immediately, nearly heroic in your enthusiasm. You've dreamed of this moment heat. Soap, the chance to feel like a man instead of a salted carcass left in the snow. The preparation takes an hour. You hear the clatter of buckets, the slosh of water, the occasional grunt of someone who's just realized the folly of carrying heat through a castle built entirely to destroy it. You sit by the fire, stripping off your armor piece by piece, imagining steam rising, muscles loosening, the glorious rebirth of your body. By the time the squire returns to fetch you, your hopes have grown reckless. It's ready, he says, avoiding eye contact. That should have been your first warning. The tub sits in the corner of the washroom, squat and wooden, its rim steaming faintly. You take one look and feel salvation close enough to taste. Steam means warmth, and warmth means life. You approach reverently, dip a finger in, then freeze, quite literally. The water bites, not just cool, not even cold, but that rare medieval temperature that makes your bones hum in confusion. It's warm, the squire insists, offended by your expression. You stare at him, fingers still numb. Warm compared to what? He shrugs. The well. You should stop there. You should demand more fire, more boiling water, more sense. But pride is a dangerous fuel. You've waited too long to back down now. Fine, you mutter, and step in. The water closes around your legs like liquid betrayal. Every nerve in your body protests. You hiss between clenched teeth, lowering yourself inch by inch, determined to pretend this is luxury. When you finally submerge to your waist, your lungs seize in shock. Refreshing, you manage to say, voice strangled. The squire beams, pleased, and begins to hand you a coarse lump of soap that smells faintly of lard and defeat. You scrub out of obligation rather than faith, the soap sliding across goose flesh like sandpaper. You tell yourself it's working, that somewhere beneath the layers of dirt, grime, and existential dread, there's still a night. The truth is, you've simply gone numb enough to mistake pain for progress. The water darkens slowly, turning a shade that suggests victory and disease in equal measure. Add more hot water, you command through chattering teeth. The squire obliges by pouring in another bucket, proudly announcing that it came straight from the hearth. It hits the tub, swirls for a moment, and then somehow makes everything colder. You stare at him in disbelief. Did you run from the hearth to here? Of course, he says, indignant. You look at the distance between the rooms, 3 corridors, 2 drafts, and 1 haunted staircase, and simply close your eyes. Minutes drag by. The bath never improves. It only becomes an exercise in endurance. Your body alternates between numb and furious, your skin prickling in waves of betrayal. The room smells faintly of smoke, wet wood, and the faint despair of every man who's ever attempted hygiene north of France. You dunk your head once, immediately questioning every choice you've made. The water clings to your hair like ice melt, trickling down your neck in slow, punishing drips. The squire, bless him, decides conversation might help. You look almost relaxed, my lord. You open one eye. Do I? He nods, like a man at peace. You stare at the rippling surface, teeth clenched. I think I've reached a new kind of peace, you say softly. The kind that comes right before death. When it's finally over, you stand, water streaming off you in a grim parody of triumph. Steam still rises, but it feels mocking now, like the ghost of actual warmth. You step out carefully, your feet sliding on the slick floor, and reach for the towel, a rough scrap of linen that feels like being flayed by politeness. The squire holds it up with ceremony, as though he's witnessing history. You dry off, dress quickly, and walk back to your chamber in silence. Later, lying under your damp blanket, you consider what you've learned. The fire cracks weakly beside you. The squire snores in the corner. Your skin tingles where the cold hasn't fully left. You've been lied to, you think. Warmth isn't a thing here. It's a story people tell to survive the cold, a myth passed down between shivers. You close your eyes, exhale a cloud of fog, and whisper, "Next time, I'll stay dirty." And in the silence that follows, the castle seems to agree. It begins, as revolutions often do, with envy. You're standing in the corridor outside the Lord's chamber, staring at the faint wisp of feather that's drifted out from under his door. It glides lazily through the air, catching the firelight before landing at your feet. You bend down, pick it up, and feel how impossibly soft it is, like touching a promise. Around you, the guards are pretending not to stare, each of them equally transfixed by the forbidden fluff. Someone whispers, "That's goose." Another man breathes, "Real goose?" And just like that, hope becomes treason. Word spreads through the castle faster than common sense ever does. The nobility, it turns out, sleep not on straw, not on sacks of old oats, but on clouds down-stuffed duvets filled with the dreams of birds, while you and the other men of duty freeze half to death beneath blankets that could exfoliate a rhinoceros. The lords are upstairs, swaddled in luxury and audacity. The realization burns hotter than any fire you've managed all winter. You try to let it go, to remind yourself that hierarchy is divine and comfort is for the chosen. But then the squire tells you the duke's chambermaid plumps his feather bed twice a day, and something in you snaps. By nightfall, the plan has formed, a small, quiet redistribution of resources. A loan, you call it, though. Everyone knows theft sounds nobler when it's cold enough to justify sin. There are 6 of you, armed, desperate, and wrapped in blankets like conspirators from a children's tale. The youngest guard, barely sprouted whiskers, carries a broom as a weapon. You bring the key pilfered from the steward, along with a resolve that feels heroic, until you realize heroes usually have better circulation. The hallway outside the noble wing is deathly still. The torch is burning low. Every creak of the floorboards feels like confession. The leader of your little rebellion, Sir Aldred, who survived 3 battles and 1 marriage, raises a finger for silence. You all nod solemnly, though the sound of your chattering teeth ruins the effect. At the end of the hall looms the door to the treasure, the Lord's private chamber, and the rumored Goosefeather Mountain within. You unlock it carefully, praying the hinge doesn't betray you. It does. The door screeches like a dying boar. Inside, the air is warm enough to make you dizzy. The fire still burns in the hearth, gold light washing over velvet curtains and rugs so thick they could hide small crimes. But it's the bed that stops you cold. It's enormous, an empire of softness, layered with quilts, pillows, and the mythical duvet. You can see it shimmer in the light, the faint rise and fall as if it's breathing. The men stand in awe. "That's not a bed," one whispers. "That's salvation." The first attempt to seize it is almost dignified. You tiptoe forward, lift the corner, and feel the warmth radiate up your arm like divine forgiveness. Then someone sneezes. The Lord stirs. Chaos erupts. You grab the duvet, Aldred grabs the other end, and the rest pile in, dragging it off the bed in a flurry of feathers and whispered curses. The nobleman bolts upright, hair wild, eyes wide. "Thieves," he cries. "Revolutionaries," Aldred corrects, hauling the loot toward the door. The duvet tears, releasing a blizzard of down into the air. For one glorious second, it snows indoors. You run, choking on feathers, tripping over the broom-wielding boy who's yelling something about justice. Behind you, the Lord bellows for guards, though most of them are already in on the plot. The chase ends in the great hall, where you collapse in a heap of laughter and stolen luxury. Feathers drift down around you like surrendering angels. The duvet is torn, but you don't care. It's still warm. You wrap yourself in it, ignoring the smudges of soot and sin, and for the first time all season, you feel truly alive. By dawn, the punishment comes. The steward storms in, pale with fury, dragging the Lord behind him. Feathers still hang in the air, caught in the rafters like evidence. You're lined up in disgrace, though none of you can stop smiling. You've committed treason, the steward hisses. Over a blanket. Aldred straightens his back. Over warmth, he says. Over survival. The Lord glares, clutching his patched duvet, his pride leaking faster than the feathers. If I find another bed missing, he warns, heads will roll. But later, when he's gone, and the hall quiets again, you notice something strange. The guards' quarters have been stocked with new bedding, rough, yes, but thicker than before, stuffed with something that might once have been goose. No one says a word. You lie back that night, listening to the faint rustle of feathers beneath you, and smile into the dark. The rebellion may have failed, technically, but in the way that matters, you won. Night settles over the castle like a damp wool cloak. The last of the daylight fades behind the mountains, leaving only the flicker of torches along the stone walls. The great hall breathes with a strange kind of life, half silence, half suffering. The fire in the hearth sighs and collapses inward, and a few hopeful sparks rise before dying in the smoky air. Around you, men huddle under, blankets that have long since given up their purpose. Someone coughs. Someone else mutters a prayer. The cold has arrived early tonight, and it plans to stay. You sit at the long table, staring into the dregs of your ale, trying to convince yourself that it's warming you from the inside. It isn't. The squire sits beside you, gnawing on a piece of bread hard enough to spark envy from the blacksmith. Across the hall, Sir Aldred pokes the fire with a stick that's more ash than wood. Needs more fuel, he says flatly. So does everything, someone replies. The laughter that follows is brief and brittle, the kind that cracks before it finishes forming. The torches begin to gutter one by one, the flames shrinking to tired little tongues. The light fades from orange to a weak blue-gray, and suddenly the room feels larger, emptier. Shadows stretch across the walls, long and uncertain, bending around the pillars like ghosts unsure of where they died. You can hear every sound, the creak of the rafters, the soft shift of armor, the faint whistle of wind squeezing through the cracks in the stones. Even the air feels heavy, like the castle itself is holding its breath. Someone at the far end of the hall curses quietly. "Bloody moon's mocking us," he says. You glance toward the window slit, where the pale light spills in like a smirk. It catches on the frost creeping along the glass, turning it into a mirror of your own misery. The squire follows your gaze. "It's bright tonight," he says. "Too bright," you answer. "Looks warm, doesn't it?" "A cruel trick," he mutters, and you nod. The moonlight doesn't warm anything. It only illuminates how cold everything is. Sir Aldred finally stands, joints creaking like old hinges. "We'll fetch more torches," he declares, though no one moves to help him. His shadow drags behind him like a tired companion as he walks toward the supply room. The door closes. The silence grows heavier. The remaining torches sputter out completely, one after another, until the hall falls into darkness thick enough to taste. Someone inhales sharply. Someone else whispers, "Saint preserve us." You sit very still, listening. The castle feels alive now, breathing in the dark, groaning, shifting, settling its ancient weight around you. The fire pops once, startling half the room. The squire beside you edges closer, his shoulder brushing yours. "Feels like the walls are watching," he says. "They are," you answer. "They just don't blink." You hear him swallow. Somewhere behind you, a chair creaks as if someone sat down who shouldn't have. Aldred's footsteps echo faintly down the corridor, then stop. You wait for his return, for the scrape of a flint, for the sweet hiss of flame. Nothing. Only the steady whisper of wind through the stones. The darkness feels personal now, intimate in its cruelty. You can't see your own hands, but you can hear your heartbeat, steady and slow, like a drum marking time until dawn. Then, faintly, someone starts to hum. It's tuneless at first, more vibration than melody. Then another joins in, and another. It spreads quietly through the hall, the sound of men too cold and too tired to talk, creating music just to keep their souls from freezing. It's low, rough, imperfect, and it fills the space like warmth once did. For a moment, you forget the dark, you forget the cold, you forget that the moon outside is staring in with its pale, mocking grin. The door bangs open. Aldred stumbles in, a single torch blazing in his hand. The sudden light cuts through the hall like divine intervention. The shadows retreat, hissing back into their corners. The faces around you blink and squint, pale and wild-eyed, like men reborn. Aldred grins, soot on his cheek, and slams the torch into its sconce. "There," he says. "Better?" No one answers, but the silence has changed. It's lighter now, edged with something close to relief. The torch crackles, the fire stirs back to life, and color returns to the room in hesitant shades of orange. The men shift, stretch, breathe again. Someone raises a cup in Aldred's direction. Someone else mutters, "To light." You lift your own cup, the ale long gone cold, and echo softly, "To light." The flames dance across the walls again, and the moon retreats behind a passing cloud. For now, the cold feels manageable, the dark less alive. You settle back on the bench, Close your eyes and let the sound of crackling fire fill the spaces where fear used to live. For tonight at least, you've won. It begins with socks. Not words, not glances, not the kind of sweeping gestures bards will later ruin with rhyme, just socks. You're sitting by the fire in the lower hall, staring at your feet like they've personally betrayed you. The socks you're wearing are more whole than fabric, two fraying disasters barely clinging to the concept of clothing. Steam rises from them in faint, mournful curls. Across the room, the laundress is wringing out a bundle of freshly washed wool, her sleeves rolled, her hair escaping its braid in soft rebellion. You've seen her before, moving through the castle like quiet competence personified. Tonight, she looks up and catches you, staring at the socks. She's holding their bright, almost impossible softness, and something wordless passes between you. You look like a man in mourning, she says, setting the new pair by the fire to dry. You shrug, trying for dignity, but achieving mostly shivering. For warmth, you say. It died early this winter. She smiles, small and crooked, the kind of smile that feels like a secret being shared. Then, after a moment, she adds, "These were meant for the steward, but he's already got 2 pairs." She nudges the drying socks closer to the flames, the gesture casual, the meaning not. The air smells of smoke and wet wool, a scent that would drive poets to despair but feels almost holy to you. You watch the steam rise, your hands stretching unconsciously toward the heat. The laundress moves closer, crouching to turn the socks so they dry evenly. "They'll shrink if you're not careful," she says. They all do. You glance at her, at the way the firelight glows against her face, and wonder if she's talking about socks or people. When she holds them out to you, the warmth feels stolen, almost forbidden. You hesitate for form's sake before taking them, the wool soft and heavy in your hands. They smell faintly of soap and sheep and something human underneath it all. "They're still damp," she warns. "So am I," you answer, which earns you a laugh that's more music than sound. You slip them on anyway. The heat seeps up through your ankles like mercy, unexpected and undeserved. You both sit in silence for a while, watching the fire chew through its last log. The wind rattles the shutters, but here by the hearth, the world feels briefly tolerable. The laundress hums under her breath a tune with no words, simple and circular. You find yourself listening like a man starved. When she stops, the quiet that follows feels louder than the storm outside. "You must freeze up in the barracks," she says finally. "It's not freezing if you stop feeling anything," you reply, and she gives you a look equal parts pity and amusement. "That sounds like something men say before they die." Her hands rest near yours on the floor, fingers reddened from the cold, knuckles roughened from work. The gap between them feels deliberate, cautious. You could close it easily, but you don't. You just let the nearness do its work. Outside, someone yells a guard changing post, the scrape of armor against stone, but it feels very far away. Inside this tiny circle of warmth, there's only her and the fire and the faint, ridiculous hope that you might not be entirely alone in this frozen tomb of a castle. She breaks the silence first. "You could come by tomorrow," she says. "There'll be another fire, more socks, if the steward's lost count." You nod, trying to look casual, failing completely. "I could deliver them," you offer, "for inspection." Her smile tilts again, somewhere between teasing and tired. "You? Inspect socks?" "I'm thorough," you say. The words hang between you like smoke, thin and warm and completely absurd. The fire pops, sending a small shower of sparks into the air. She brushes one from her sleeve without looking away from you. "You should sleep before you talk yourself into poetry," she murmurs, standing to leave. You watch her go, the faint scent of soap trailing behind her like a promise. The socks still hug your feet, radiating the last of their heat, holding more comfort than you've earned. You sit there until the fire shrinks to embers, listening to the echo of her footsteps fading down the corridor. The hall feels colder without her, but not as cruel. You flex your toes, the wool whispering against your skin, and think maybe warmth isn't a thing you find. Maybe it's something people smuggle between them, quietly, when no one's looking. You lie down on your cot near the hearth, still wearing the socks, and close your eyes. The wind howls outside, the stones creak, the world continues its indifference. But your feet stay warm, and for the first time all winter, you sleep without dreaming of fire. The herbalist looks at you with the serene confidence of someone who's never truly been cold. She sits by her table of jars and dried plants, surrounded by the smell of things that died politely. "You knights," she says, stirring a bowl of something red and ominous, always shivering, always complaining. "What you need is balance. Fire inside the body." You nod as if you understand, though the phrase "fire inside" sounds less medicinal and more threatening. She dips a wooden spoon into the bowl and holds it up. The mixture glistens like fresh blood in the candlelight. "Warming salve," she says, "made from nature's own heat." You hesitate. "How warm?" Her smile widens. "Enough to chase winter out of your bones." You should leave right then, but the thought of another night freezing in your cot pushes you forward. She pours a small portion into a clay jar and presses it into your hands. "Rub it wherever the cold bites," she instructs. "It will sting at first, then comfort." You thank her, give her 2 copper coins, and ignore the faint sound of her laughter following you out the door. Back in your chamber, the fire has died again. The air feels like it's chewing through your skin. You set the jar down, remove your gloves, and study the stuff. It smells sharp and sour, with a sweetness that suggests deceit. The squire peers over your shoulder. "Looks like stew," he says. "Smells like punishment," you reply. He grins. "Try it." And because misery loves witnesses, you do. You scoop out a small glob with 2 fingers and rub it onto your forearms. The texture is oily, slick, but heavy, clinging like guilt. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the warmth comes slowly, delicately, like a candle being lit in your veins. You sigh in relief, closing your eyes, almost smiling. "It works," you whisper. "It actually works." The squire claps, triumphant. And then it happens. The warmth sharpens, brightens, spreads. What was once pleasant becomes fervent, then blistering. Your skin ignites with invisible flame. You lurch to your feet, eyes wide, the sensation crawling up your arms like molten rope. "It burns," you shout. The squire blinks. "That's good, isn't it?" "No." You roar, shaking your hands as though you can fling the pain away. The air fills with the scent of roasted regret and something distinctly peppery. You dash to the wash basin, plunge your arms into the water, and discover a new layer of torment. The cold collides with the heat, creating a sensation that defies language. Steam rises from the basin, your skin glowing pink in the flickering firelight. The squire, ever helpful, reads the label on the jar. "Chili oil," he says, grinning nervously. She must have meant well. "So does frostbite," you bellow. Minutes stretch like hours. The burning doesn't fade, it evolves. It finds new depths, new levels of intimacy. You feel it behind your knees, in your spine, in the small regrets of your childhood. Your body becomes a map of bad decisions. The squire offers snow from the windowsill. You press it against your skin and nearly scream. Every solution makes it worse. The castle smells faintly of you now, spice and suffering mingled with smoke. When the pain finally dulls to a manageable roar, you collapse into a chair, panting, red as a sunset in hell. The squire pours ale over your arms, for reasons unclear but spirits high. It doesn't help, though it does make you sticky. "Next time," he says between laughs, "you should test it on the cat first." You glare at him, too tired to kill him, but making a note for spring. Hours later, long after the fire has gone cold again, Your arms still radiate heat. Not the pleasant kind, this is the heat of memory, of lesson learned through humiliation. You flex your fingers carefully, the skin flushed but intact. You wonder if this is how dragons feel, powerful, miserable, and slightly ridiculous. You lie back on your cot, half wrapped in a blanket, half basking in your self-inflicted inferno. The castle groans around you, the wind howls outside, and you almost laugh. The herbalist was right, in a way. You aren't cold anymore, you're glowing. You're alive in the worst possible way. Somewhere deep in the night, you whisper to yourself, pain counts as warmth. It's not wisdom, but it's something. You close your eyes, arms throbbing like twin bonfires, and drift toward sleep. For the first time all winter, you don't dream of freezing. You dream of fire, and you dream of revenge. The castle at night isn't quiet. It only pretends to be. From a distance, it looks peaceful, moonlight spilling across the towers, the banners drooping in still air, but step inside, and the illusion cracks. The halls hum with noise, the kind that grows when the day finally stops pretending at order. You lie awake on your cot, staring at the beams above you, listening to the soundscape of exhaustion. The castle has turned into an orchestra composed entirely of men who've stopped caring how they sound. It begins with Sir Aldred, always the opening act. His snore starts low and deliberate, a deep rumble from somewhere in his chest that sounds like a bear trapped under a church bell. It echoes through the corridor, rattling the candle holders on the walls. Then, from the next chamber over, Sir Benoit joins in higher pitched, a kind of strangled whine that rises and falls like a bagpipe in distress. Together they form a duet of misery, perfectly out of sync. The sound bounces off the stones, doubling itself, turning the air into a living thing. You pull the blanket over your head. It doesn't help. The squire adds percussion, soft snorts, occasional kicks against the wall, and once, inexplicably, the clanging of armor he insists on sleeping beside for security. The fire in the hearth hisses in rhythm, occasionally spitting sparks like applause. The whole hall breathes and wheezes, a mechanical chorus of mortality. You close your eyes, trying to find stillness, but the castle has other plans. From down the corridor comes the steady creak of the wooden stairs, probably the night watch making his rounds. Though at this hour, it sounds more like a ghost pacing in thought. Then, faint but clear, a man's voice drifts through the dark. Sir Gawain, the pious one, holding his usual midnight conversation with the Almighty. "I said I'd do better," he mutters. "I haven't lied about that. You know my heart." There's a pause, a sigh. Yes, but that was before the mead. The room around you falls silent just long enough to hear him add, "Don't look at me like that," as though God has stepped into the corridor personally to glare. The snoring resumes soon after, louder now, as if the others are competing with him for divine attention. Someone shifts in their sleep, muttering nonsense about siege ladders. Another man laughs a short, breathy sound that might have been joy or indigestion. You consider throwing a boot at the wall just to reassert your own existence, but you know it'll only join the cacophony. The castle isn't built for silence, it's built for echo. Every sigh, every groan, every snore finds its twin and multiplies. You get up quietly, wrapping the blanket around your shoulders, and open the door to the corridor. The air is cold and damp, but it feels alive, vibrating faintly with the combined music of men asleep. You walk barefoot down the hall, past flickering candles and hanging tapestries that sway slightly in unseen drafts. The stone floor hums beneath you. In one room, a knight sleeps on his back, mouth open, producing a sound that can only be described as heroic drowning. In another, two men snore in perfect alternating rhythm, one inhaling as the other exhales, a harmony of unconscious suffering. You stop and listen, oddly impressed. Further down, near the chapel door, you find Sir Gawain again, kneeling in the dark, still arguing with heaven. His words blend with the crackle of the candle beside him. "If you wanted me to resist temptation," he says, voice trembling with sincerity, "you shouldn't have made women smell like bread." You close the door gently before God gets a chance to respond. You make your way back to your cot, weaving through corridors that feel like veins carrying the heartbeat of the castle itself. Every snore, cough, and whispered prayer is part of it. You lie down again, listening to the strange music continue without you. The wind outside moans through the arrow slits, joining the choir. Somewhere above, pigeons shift in the rafters, cooing their sleepy counterpoint. It's absurd, and yet somehow comforting. The noise means life's stubborn, unrefined, ridiculous life, refusing to surrender to the cold. You imagine the sound reaching beyond the walls, floating out into the night like a hymn made entirely of imperfection. The world beyond is frozen and silent, but here inside, men dream loudly enough to fill the void. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm take you. Aldred's bass, Benoit's treble, the hissing of the fire, the distant mutter of faith and guilt, all of it blends into something strangely whole. The castle snores on, and for once, you don't fight it. You drift with it, warm beneath the blanket, another instrument in the grand, sleepless symphony. Morning doesn't arrive so much as stumble in uninvited, knocking over your last shred of peace. The first sign isn't light, there is none. The windows are coated in frost, thick enough to obscure the sun entirely, turning the world into one long, unbroken shade of blue misery. The second sign is noise. The sound of boots, dozens of them, being forced onto feet that no longer trust their owners. It starts faintly, a grunt, a curse, the sharp slap of leather against stone. Then it spreads like a plague. The whole corridor becomes a symphony of defiance, every night discovering anew that his boots have frozen into small, angry monuments overnight. You sit up, bones creaking, breath turning visible in the air. The straw mattress crackles beneath you, like it's complaining. Your blanket clings to you, heavy with damp and faintly perfumed with smoke and whatever essence despair gives off. The moment you swing your legs over the side, the cold leaps up to greet you, sharp and personal. You stare at your boots. By the hearth, or what used to be a hearth, before the fire surrendered hours ago, they stand upright, solid, frost-rimmed, looking smug. The squire sits nearby, poking his own pair with a stick. "They're alive," he says. You narrow your eyes. They're plotting. The first attempt is optimistic. You grab one boot, pry it open, and immediately realize you've overestimated your strength and underestimated winter's spite. The leather refuses to bend, the sole stiff as armor. You try warming it with your hands, but your hands are colder than your thoughts. "Bring me the poker," you say. The squire hesitates. "The one from the fire?" You glare. "Yes, the one from the imaginary roaring blaze." He hands it over. You hold it near the boot's opening, praying for heat or divine intervention, or at least a sense of humor. The leather softens slightly, enough to give you false hope. You shove your foot in, twisting, grunting, muttering words not approved by the chapel. The boot resists, then gives all at once, swallowing your toes in one cruel, icy gulp. It's like plunging your foot into the conscience of a glacier. You let out a sound that would embarrass a banshee. The squire claps politely. "One down," he says. You lift your head slowly. "Say that again," you warn, voice thin with rage. "One down, sir," he repeats, quieter now. The second boot proves worse. It's somehow wetter, heavier, and colder, a masterpiece of inconvenience. When you finally force it on, your toes cease to be yours. They belong to history now, preserved forever in this castle's cold museum of suffering. You stand, wobbling, the floor biting at your heels through the thin soles. The squire coughs delicately. "Breakfast?" You look at him. "If it's warm, I'll night it." You limp down the corridor, the air thick with the smell of damp wool and morning defeat. Other knights are already up, stamping in place, groaning as they try to coax motion. into limbs that have gone on strike. Sir Benoit bangs his foot against the wall, shouting that his boots have turned traitor. Sir Aldred, ever practical, has wrapped his feet in rags soaked in ale and claims it's medicinal. You're not sure if it works, but he looks content and slightly flammable. Someone opens the door to the courtyard, and the dawn finally seeps in pale, thin, and utterly useless. The light lands on the frost-slick stones like an insult. The air outside hits you with the force of divine punishment. Every inhale freezes in your throat. Every exhale turns to mist before it leaves your lips. The chickens in the yard look half dead. The stable boy moves like a condemned soul, carrying a bucket that's already frozen over at the top. The sound of boots continues everywhere. Thuds, cracks, curses. The whole castle has become a percussion ensemble of frustration. Somewhere, a knight cries out in triumph his foot has gone through his boot entirely. You can't decide whether he's won or lost. At the mess hall, the fire has finally been coaxed into something resembling life. You huddle near it, boots steaming faintly, the smell of thawing leather mingling with porridge. The warmth doesn't reach your bones, but it gives the illusion of mercy. The squire sits beside you, smiling faintly, his own boots still off and drying by the wall. "It's not so bad," he says. "Could be colder." You stare at him for a long moment, then gesture at your feet. "If it were colder," you say, "we'd be statues." He laughs softly, and for once, you let it slide. The fire cracks, the boots drip, and outside, the sun begins its slow crawl above the frozen towers. Morning has arrived, indifferent as ever. You close your eyes, breathe in the faint scent of smoke and survival, and whisper to no one, "One more night endured." The boots creak in agreement. You finally understand it somewhere between one shiver and the next. It isn't that anyone here conquers the cold. No one wins against winter. They simply endure it loudly. Every man, woman, servant, and stray dog in the castle has learned the same bitter gospel. You can't fight the frost, only outlast it and insult it often enough that it starts to take it personally. You sit by the dying fire in the great hall, boots steaming faintly, hands hovering over the coals. Around you, the survivors of another frozen night look like soldiers after battle pale, trembling, but somehow proud of their suffering. Sir Aldred blows into his mug of something that might be ale or might be melted candle wax. He drinks anyway. "Better warm than wise," he mutters. His nose is red enough to signal ships. Across the room, the squire is asleep, sitting up, wrapped in a horse blanket and drooling into it like it's a lover. The cooks are arguing near the hearth. One claims the porridge has good stiffness this morning. The other insists it's frozen because the oats are mourning. Someone laughs, and the sound is so rare it startles the fire into life again. Even the flames seem to enjoy the company. You can see the humor of it now, the way the whole castle rattles and wheezes and still insists on calling itself alive. The servants bring in buckets of water from the well, each surface glimmering with a skin of ice that cracks like glass when they break it. Steam rises from their breath, but no one complains anymore. Complaining is the air they breathe. "The cold keeps us honest," says one maid, wringing out a rag stiff as wood. "If it got warmer, half of us would forget to wake up." Another replies, "Then may honesty take the day off." Outside, the courtyard glows in thin morning light. Frost clings to every stone, every gate, every stubborn blade of grass. The chickens huddle together like monks in a crisis of faith. The horses stamp, snort, and eye the stable boy as if plotting mutiny. The air carries that quiet hum of exhaustion that only people who have survived another night can hear. You step into it, breath freezing instantly, and for once it doesn't feel cruel. It feels familiar, like an uninvited guest you've learned to share a drink with. In the armory, knights stomp and mutter as they thaw their gear over small, sputtering braziers. One man warms his gauntlets and sighs with such relief it sounds indecent. Another slaps his friend on the back, shouting, "Still got all 10 fingers?" The friend lifts his hands proudly. 8.5. The room roars with laughter that rattles the rafters. Even misery, it seems, can't resist good company. You think of the first night you spent here, teeth clattering, cursing the walls, wondering how anyone could survive such endless cold. Now you realize they never stopped feeling it. They simply folded it into life. It's in the way they laugh too loudly at small things, the way they huddle in corners not for comfort but out of instinct. It's in the shared bread, the clinking mugs, the communal sigh that fills the hall at dusk. The cold doesn't leave. It just becomes part of the rhythm. When the squire finally wakes, he hands you a mug of something steaming. You sip it cautiously. It's terrible. Half ale, half broth, but it's hot, and that's enough. The warmth spreads slowly, curling through your chest like a secret. The squire grins at you, teeth chattering so hard it almost counts as applause. "Still alive," he says. Somehow. You raise your mug in salute. Around you, others do the same. Soldiers, cooks, maids, all bundled and rumpled, all bearing the same hollow-eyed defiance. The castle hums with quiet laughter and clumsy cheer, a patchwork of breath and hope holding back the endless frost. It isn't triumph, not really. It's something older, more stubborn. You glance toward the windows, where the frost has drawn its white lace across the glass. The world beyond is silent, frozen, and vast. But here, inside these drafty, imperfect walls, there's noise, snoring, cursing, laughter, the creak of boots, the hiss of fire, life, raw and ridiculous, still happening. You finally get it. The secret was never warmth. It was the noise, the company, the refusal to suffer quietly. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, listen to the hall breathe, and smile into the steam of your cup. The cold may never leave this place, but neither will you.